Hello everyone and welcome to Stan the Wine Man TV. I am your host, Stan Rutan, and this is the Blue Collar Wine Show where I help you spend your wine dollars wisely. And when it comes to wine dollars and spending them wisely, I can't think of a better place to go than Barnard Griffin. I'm honored to have Rob here. He has, said he would do an interview with me. So we're going to talk about how Rob got to where he is. Are you the third or fourth largest winery in the state of Washington?
Oh boy, maybe once upon a time. Now we're far down the list, to be honest.
6 or 7, yeah.
Or
even further?
Even further. It depends how you count.
Okay.
If you count a big corporate entity that has 6 wineries as one, that puts us farther up the list.
Okay.
But they're 1 through 6. So.
Okay. Yeah, well, St. Michelle's a big dog.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. Anyway, Rob started off he went to UC Davis. What year did you go?
Gosh, I went into Davis in 1971.
Straight out of high school?
Straight out of high school.
Then in 75, you went to work for Buena Vista.
Buena Vista.
In California.
Which was interesting because the wine industry was, believe it or not, in a recession in those days. It's very cyclical in the wine industry. And jobs were thin on the ground, so I actually went to work at Buena Vista with a shovel in my hand in the vineyard, following a crew around doing what we call sucker, taking off unnecessary vegetation off the vines. And that lasted about a day, and then I went into the laboratory as an assistant winemaker at vineyard guy wages. Good deal for them. So
yeah, I guess so. And you got to work with the famous Chelchachev?
Chelchachev.
Chelchachev.
Andre Chelchachev was a consultant there, and I got to sit in on weekly sessions with Andre talking about the wines during the production season and so forth. Very, very wonderful education for me. And at one point, Buena Vista had both the oldest operating and the newest operating winery in the state of California. So
wow.
that was we went from really 19th century technology in some of the tanks they were still using, old wooden vats, all the way to the newest kind of equipment. In those days, I'm talking about the mid-70s here, so that's now ancient technology.
Yeah. Chelchachev, he is mentioned a lot in The Judgment of Paris and also The House of Mondavi, of both those books.
Oh yeah, he was an absolute seminal person in the evolution of high-quality wine in California. No doubt about it.
And then you decided to jump to Washington. What made you decide that you thought Washington State had barely a wine industry back then?
I have to admit that what stimulated me, what got my imagination going, was an old, and I'm talking very old, Chateau Saint Michelle back label where they had a map of Washington and a map of France and the latitude running just a little bit north of Bordeaux and a little south of Burgundy, with the Yakima Valley, which is what people talked about back in those days. Mm-hmm. And it intrigued me. I thought, high quality wine is a European phenomenon. Why not go to a climate that is a little more European? I mean, if you do that same exercise with California, you're in Morocco or Algeria. And that doesn't have the reputation that France has. So Anyway, I found the idea of Washington very intriguing and pursued opportunities up here. I didn't honestly think I'd stay here my whole career. I'd just be here a few years and make a big name for myself.
Well, okay, you stayed a few more years before you made a big name for yourself. So you started off with the Preston Winery, and then in my early days of being in the grocery store, I remember Preston. That was a big label back then.
Yeah, Preston was the second largest winery in the state of Washington virtually the day he opened. He was a visionary, and Bill was not the kind of person to do anything in half measures. He jumped in with both feet, and frankly, it was a little bit, as he would have said, a bull in a china closet. He got in and realized pretty quickly that making it's easier than selling it, and growing it and making it's not easy. But all of that being said, we were very successful in those days. We took top awards at the then Pacific Northwest wine competitions and so forth. So Preston did very well indeed in the early days.
Oh yeah, I remember it was a big label. Then in '83 you decided to start your own label. And where did you first make your wine in '83?
I traded space in the corners of other tiny wineries, and I consulted in the sense that I oversaw the winemaking, and in those days that often meant crushing the grapes and pumping the juice, and also the federal paperwork and so forth, and I bartered that for space. So basically we spared ourselves overhead in the early days when we couldn't necessarily afford it, and at the same time I provided a useful service to others. Now many of those wineries aren't around anymore. It was a grower enterprise that decided not to get down in the trenches and fight in this business.
Yeah, can be. So then you went to work for Hogue in 1983.
In 1983, yes. And Hogue at that time was considerably smaller than I am now. I'm relatively tiny, but it was different days in the industry. Hogue was very innovative in that he was a farmer first, and the winery was an extension of the farm.
Right.
But Mike understood the need for marketing and merchandising. That was something most small farmer wineries had no concept of.
Yeah.
So he built something pretty impressive.
He did.
And
ended up selling it.
By the time I left Hogue, there were, at least 4 people doing a job I had more or less done by myself when I got there, and it got to be a bigger organization than I was either comfortable or capable with, and I preferred doing my own thing on a smaller scale.
So when did you start this facility? I read somewhere like around 96?
Yes, we actually purchased the property here in 1996, broke ground, I guess it was in early 90. Well, no, wait, it was later 96, and then in 97 we actually got the building up and so on and so forth.
Right. So between 83 and 91, you were basically making wine for Hogue and making wine for your label.
That's right, and of course,
That's a lot of work.
great deal bigger volume for the first than for the second.
So by 91, what was your production level?
In about then, and of course I'm vamping a little bit here, but we were over 15,000 cases.
Wow.
And that was without a facility, so it got
That's why you're working at Hogue.
Got to be challenging. Well, actually, I left Hogue in 91, and Bill Powers at Badger Mountain was willing to let me kind of move inside his building, the same kind of deal. I did winemaking consulting and some paperwork kinds of things, whatever, but he was a great pioneer.
Oh yeah, Bill Powers is a very, very awesome guy. I got to interview him.
Oh, wonderful.
Just like 3 months before he died.
Great.
Well, that was really nice to get him on tape. I think I'm the only guy that got him on tape.
And he was so colorful. That's
yes, he was. He was. He had his dog running around. It was early days of me too. I mean, it wasn't the best environment set up for that. So you built this building in '96. Now it's grown to this, and your wife Deborah has a glass shop next door, and you have a restaurant here. And, so when did you build the restaurant?
We did that. Gosh, it's been about 7 years ago. We undertook that project. Deborah's a glass artist, so she has a studio where they create fused glass pieces. We may be the only winery with a fused glass teaching operation inside our doors.
And she's quite successful at it too.
She has been very recognized, I guess is a good way to put it. So
it's pretty awesome. So when you started this whole thing, and this is always curious to me, is you started at a very, what I would call a very reasonably priced wine. So you started with the Tulip label, very famous Tulip. Now, what was your business approach to that? Why did you decide to come in with, well, I think at the time it was like $8 a bottle of wine.
Well, at the time, we were more maybe 10, but that was kind of expensive. Think back to 1983.
It was for me.
The industry had not gotten to the point where $40, $50, $60, $100 wines were even imagined by most. There may have been one or two, but they were curiosities that didn't sell much. So we We started at a higher point in the market, certainly higher than the fighting varietal, if you would, kinds of things that were going on in grocery stores. But I always had a strong belief that, if I could just make it, I'd be happy. I love making it.
Yeah.
I'm not that adept at selling it. So our plan was always, build it and they will come, make the wines affordable, and people will buy them and life will be good. And that was a very solid business plan for us. We were able to grow from, as I say, about 15,000 cases up to 75 to 80,000 cases.
Is that where you're at today?
We're a little smaller than that today,
Okay.
I'll be honest. It's been tougher times in the wine business the last few years.
Well, that's true. And part of it is that there's quite a glut going on.
Oh,
right
yeah,
now.
and the proliferation of brands. When I came to Washington in 1977, there were roughly 10 wineries. I can do fingers and toes and name just about all of them because it was a very small industry. Now we have 1,000.
Right.
So imagine the pressure on wine lists and grocery shelves. And,
Oh yeah.
your piece of the consumer's mind is harder to maintain with that much
Right.
production. Now, competition is good,
Yes.
but
Too much is not so good.
Yeah.
What I appreciated, Rob, is that even though you started out at a high price point, you kind of kept it there. Like right now, we sell I think most of this label right here, new actually. We'll talk about that in a minute. Goes for around $13.50 retail.
Yeah. So we're it's.
Which is a great price point.
Technically, the front line price is closer to 18, but nothing ever trades at front line price in the wine
That's all
industry.
smoke and mirrors, right?
Yeah, there is a lot of smoke and mirrors to it. And there are a couple reasons for that. One is that I have very deep grower contacts and have access to high quality fruit at what I consider reasonable prices. The other is that we've been around long enough that we really don't have any debt at all.
Yeah.
We are not paying a bank. So
that's a good thing.
that allows us to put the wines in front of people at much more appealing prices than if we were paying a bank.
Yeah. Well, that's good. The other thing I like too is that even that price point, you've earned a lot of accolades for a bunch of your wines. I mean, you get awards, you get medals, even at that price point.
Yeah, we've been recognized in any number of places for high quality. And also, to be honest, Dan, we're kind of in two businesses. We're in the broad distribution business, which is how you know us, because that's the business you're in. But we also make smaller lot reserve quality wines that we sell here at the winery. So, we aren't talking about $12 and $15 bottles here. We're talking about $30 and $60 bottles, like much of the wine industry.
Sure.
So we are able to do both credibly and well. So.
Yeah, in fact, we just did that tasting with you on Zoom back in June, and we sold quite a bit of the Grenache and you do a Reserve Grenache, you do a Red Mountain Cab.
Yeah, we did a Red Mountain Cab. Did we do the Côte d'Ivoire Red?
Yes, we did the Côte d'Ivoire Red, which is part of that reserve program.
Yeah.
And I still think for the quality of those wines, and we tasted through those wines, I think it's still very reasonably priced.
Yeah, it's still, relatively speaking, it's very easy to pay more and get less. Put it that way. We've always believed in over-delivering more as a self-preservation angle than for any other reason, to be very honest.
Yeah.
I'm happy making the wine and staying out of the spotlight if I can. One good way to do that is to make the wines affordable for people.
Well, that's true. And sometimes I don't understand. Like my good friend went to work for a very high profile winery in Napa Valley. They only make a couple of wines. Their release price is $800 a bottle. And I asked him, I said, don't you want people to try the wines you're making? Except for the ultra rich, I would think as a winemaker, do you feel that way? You want people to enjoy what you're producing and enjoy your talents as a winemaker?
I've always felt that way. I think, the Napa Valley, and I grew up close to the Napa Valley. My uncle was a grower on the Oakville Crossroad back in the 60s. I knew that area before it became what it is now. And it really became a society thing. It, frankly, from my opinion, and I'll take criticism for this, it became less about the wine and more about the social graces associated with buying $800 wines in the Napa Valley. You talk to Europeans and they just chuckle at the Napa Valley prices. Of course, they're jealous. They scratch their heads. But at the same time, if you look at global quality, at least what I perceive to be quality, those wines are rather spendy, some of them.
Oh.
And they're very good. I don't.
Well,
deny that.
I've had my fair share, because I had a really good friend who was able to afford those types of wine. And I agree with Chris Spartman when he said, a lot of Washington wines have scored the same points as some of these big dogs from Napa at a third the price.
Oh yeah, but people like reputation. It's like in China they want Bordeaux reputation.
Yep.
They want
First growth.
They want Burgundy. Absolutely, it's
Yeah.
got to be perceived as the best. But that's anytime you're producing a consumer product where the quality is not necessarily provable, it's a little risky.
Yeah.
But, and there have been times in my life when I thought maybe I should have stayed in California, but you look at the last 2 months and Lord, it's burning down. It's terrifying.
It is terrifying.
I know some of those people and certainly know some of the wineries, and
Yeah.
they're just gone overnight.
Cane's burned down, and that's had a good reputation.
Oh yeah, there
Cane.
are lots. Burgess.
So here we've had quite a few fires in Oregon. You had a fire here not too long ago. How are you guys dealing with smoke taint? Just let those guys know when you have smoke taint, how do you deal with it?
It's an issue. It's not fully understood. Some of the best science in the world is being done right here in Richland at WSU, and the reality is we're just beginning to learn how to identify some of the precursors. Because the worst thing about smoke taint is it's not all that clear when you pick the grapes. It's 6 months later some of these ash can and dead barbecue odors start emerging from the wine. So you need to be looking at precursors. But there are a couple generally held beliefs, one of which is the greater the distance you are from the fire and the longer the smoke has been in the air, the less likely it is to taint the fruit.
Interesting.
And we, at least here in the vineyards I work with, in most cases are a great distance from any actual fire. All of that being said, we're cautious about it, but again, I'm working with relationships with growers. I'm keeping my eyes open, but right now, the few labs that can do the kind of analysis that can give you an idea whether you're going to have a smoke taint problem, they're backed up a month.
Oh, yeah.
We don't have a month to wait. So.
Well, the one down in California, they had to evacuate.
Oh yeah.
A lot of people use them.
Yeah, that's the biggest.
Yeah.
And suddenly they're just shut down. So anyway, the reality is we work with our growers. I think if I have a problem, I can go back to them. But I might be being naive and I might have my head in the sand, but it's something we're aware of and cautious of, but I'm not letting it ruin my life. Let's put it that way.
That's awesome.
And part of that is just a function of the location of the vineyards.
Yeah. Well, that's cool. Let's look at what you got here to try, and let's talk a little bit about
We're going to very quickly, I mentioned we're kind of in two businesses. We make reserve style wine, so I thought it'd be fun to pour one that really is for sale only here at the winery. It's a Rhone blended white, Viognier and Roussanne, and we have a Rhone blended red that I facetiously call Côte de Rob. So this is Côte de Rob Blanc, and it's kind of it would be not unlike a Côte de Rhone Blanc wine.
Côte de Rob, love it. So what do you sell this for at the winery?
Oh gosh, you're going to ask me a question. I think about $25.
$25. So this is a Rhone style blend. How many grapes are in it?
Just two. Just
Viognier Roussanne.
Viognier and
I'll
Roussanne.
give them a little. They can't see it from here, but there it is. $25.
Viognier is a northern Rhone variety, and Roussanne more of a southern Rhone variety. But it's all Rhone.
It's all Rhone.
me, it's got some peachy character,
Oh, yeah.
some interesting varietal. And one thing about Rhone whites, they tend to be broad and fleshy on the palate. It's not like Riesling or Chablis, where
Right.
it's
Racing.
really,
It's more, yeah.
yeah, it's a little broader.
That's an interesting sort of vegetal, like fresh veggie thing on the nose.
I would call that herbal, Stan.
Okay.
Actually, to
Well,
me, again,
You're,
this
you're
is
the
southern.
guest, so we'll call it herbal.
To me, it's peach and mango, but
Well, I get that too. I just get.
as what I don't think it is pyrazine, which is what I always identify as vegetable.
To me, I guess what I'm saying is you walk into a section of the produce department that has fresh veggies. You don't get the pyrazine, but you know that
Yeah.
smell you get?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's what I'm getting.
Something
Not the pyrazine, but just
Oh.
that freshness of those veggies. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, I can accept that. You bet.
Got to be careful with Rob, you know. He's not afraid to tell you what he thinks. That's very good. I like the balance on this.
Yeah, I think it has a nice, broad, rich. This is kind of a wine that goes nicely with cheese courses or with
Good mango
poultry,
kind of
yeah.
mango thing on the
Mhm,
mid palate that I
mhm.
like a lot. Now your daughter Megan is starting to get more and more involved in the
Absolutely,
winemaking.
yeah. She's off a little bit on a maternity leave right now, but she's taken the primary role in white wine making the last couple of years. So
I forgot to ask, what did she have?
oh, a girl.
A girl, because they were
Lucille.
going to be surprised, right?
Yeah, they were going to be
Okay,
surprised.
so Lucille.
They did not burn down the Northwest with a gender reveal. So that
Well,
happened in the hospital.
Thank goodness.
Yeah.
See what? But if you lived in California, she may have. No, just kidding.
This is
A
true.
little bit of white pepper on the backside of
Yeah,
this.
I think so.
Yeah, very, very end of this wine is really good. Well, the whole wine is really good. This would be great with chicken.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah.
And in the era where I was educated at the University of California at Davis, winemaking was more it was an eliminate the negative approach. And now it's more accentuate the positive. They teach winemaking in the theater arts department, but in our day it was more a question of making sure there were no technical flaws or visible faults, and let the fruit express itself. And when it comes down to spending a lot of time characterizing it, that's your job.
Well, you're searching for balance. And,
Oh yeah,
and
absolutely.
of acidity, fruit, and whatever. In this case, this has great balance.
Yeah, and we're in Washington, and acidity and crisp cleanness is what we do. So I always believe that our wine should show a lot of acidity.
That's a great wine. So great food wine, which is Now, do you approach winemaking with the food in mind? I mean, obviously,
I do.
You're a little bit of a, I hate the word to use, foodie, but you do like to cook. And,
Oh yeah,
and all
absolutely.
that. And so, you look at your winemaking in that way? And
Yeah,
you taught Megan to do that, or
Really, I think what we're trying to do is to maximize the correct varietal character and proper fruitiness of anything, and particularly in whites that we make, and that just happens to go hand in glove with food. And
you know how it's true that some winemakers can screw up terroir, can screw up a lot of things. But I think some of the best winemakers, at least I've heard them say, and it seems to be a theme, just get the fruit, make sure the fruit's good, and then don't screw with it.
absolutely, it's a question of getting something when it's ready to go and getting out of its way. You bet.
For instance, how do you feel about the trend towards micro-oxygenation? What's wrong with that one?
Well, it's a great technique to minimize unpleasant sulfur-driven reductive flavors. So,
Okay.
and there's a whole school of super reductive white winemaking versus slightly oxidated white winemaking, and I can say I have a foot in both camps, but I think it can be done to extremes. I think the tendency, call it the New Zealand tendency to eliminate oxygen throughout the whole process, I think you end up with wines that are aggressive, maybe even excessively fruity, if you like. If you can think of a really strong New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc that's like grapefruit rind, that sometimes can be that they're lovely wines, but we don't all have to do that.
Right. Thank goodness we don't all do that.
Yeah.
So you just get good fruit and don't mess with it too much.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Let's segue maybe into Rosé of Sangiovese.
Now this is the one that you've gotten the most awards for.
Recently, yes indeed, for the last 14 years, I think, in the San Francisco International Competition, we've always gotten, but with one exception, we've gotten a gold medal or better, and once they developed a sweepstakes award in the rosé category, we've gotten that 3 times. And we're competing there mostly against Northern California producers, but also some global producers. We enter competitions rarely. We don't do nearly as much of that as some people, but it's a good way to see how we're doing competitively. And when we can go to California in a field of 75 or 100 rosés, ours is the best many years in a row.
Oh yeah, I know.
That says something.
And you've ramped up production of this quite a bit.
We have, yeah. It started in a very, very limited way. That it's an interesting story. Our very good friend and grower Maury Balcom was the guy who way back when lent us a few tons of grapes in 1983 and helped us get started. And we've enjoyed buying fruit from Maury ever since. But he had planted some Sangiovese. He thought he would make red wine out of it, and it was never anything I had a strong interest in. But one year he kind of showed up at the winery and said, "What are we going to do with this Sangiovese?" And I said, "Have you got a mouse in your pocket?" Anyway, we made some red out of his Sangiovese, and it wasn't terribly successful, I'll be honest. It's a difficult variety. Even in Chianti, it's a difficult variety.
Oh yeah. Highly acidic?
Yeah, highly acidic. It can
Tannic.
be very tannic. The lovely fruitiness of it gets burned out in your classic red fermentation. But everything that makes it inappropriate, at least in our climate, under most conditions, as a red, makes it a beautiful rosé. So we tried that in year 2, very limited quantity, about 400 cases. Our wholesaler at the time was very suspicious of the idea of a dry rosé. Dry rosé hadn't happened or re-happened yet, and we were really on the leading edge,
on the cusp of a big
on the lead of that wave.
Yeah.
We caught that wave, so to speak, and but the quality of Sangiovese as rosé is remarkable. It tends to I characterize it as pomegranate, a little strawberry.
Oh yeah, definitely.
But the wine is dry, but it's crisp, it's clean, it's remarkably pleasant.
There's a little sorbet coming through on the nose for me, like strawberry sorbet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can see that.
So back in the day, we'd sell out by 1st of July.
Yes, yeah, we were producing
That's how people they still clamor for your Rosé of Sangiovese. So this is the 2019, I'm assuming? Yeah.
Yes, and
it rolls in at about $13.50, right?
Yeah,
Retail.
and we used this is our reserve package. And we used that because we were making a statement that this is a seasonal thing. It's not going to be available year round. Well, the whole dynamics of the rosé market have changed, and we really need to make enough to make it available year round. So we now do that. But you're right. It used to sell out early.
Yeah,
and
I remember.
It got us in trouble.
I know. I said, I wish I would have bought more. It was gone. Mm-hmm. And you probably don't sell out now because you produce enough to.
Yes, we don't have a gap right at the moment.
Yeah.
And we particularly won't this year because much of our spring restaurant business wasn't able to happen due to the obvious situation we're all in.
Our heart goes out to a lot of restaurant owners. Yeah. Good color. Not too dark, not as pale as some rosé snobs like it. I don't mean it. No offense, but some people will only buy rosé if it's salmon colored.
I can't understand that myself. I find the salmon tone and color to be kind of unpleasant, to be honest. And to me, it just screams unripe fruit. Now, the exception there is obviously Champagne,
Yeah.
where they've brought that to an art. But, you know, why?
So you're not a big fan of Provence rosés?
I'm sure there are some absolutely magnificent ones, Dan.
Good answer.
I'm waiting. I'm waiting to find it. But, you know, to be honest, the ones I've had are
They're very herbal,
high volume commercial.
Not as much fruit.
Not as much fruit. They tend to be a little green in flavor. Not to my liking. And my French winemaker friends are a little dismissive of the whole concept, although they admire the commercial side of it. Certainly.
My favorite rosé in France is Tavel.
Oh yeah, Tavel. And
Those
of course
are-
they've been doing it forever.
And their color is even darker than yours.
Oh yeah.
That's all they make there is rosé. Very meaty, good fruit, but still dry like this. This is got a lot of flavors, a little citrus going on, strawberry, but still dry.
Yeah.
Good acidity.
Rich balance, and it's funny when this wine in February, it kind of takes your head off. The acidity is high. But wait a couple months and it softens naturally into beautiful.
Yeah, this is different than it was when you first released it, for sure. Yeah.
And you know the irony is, well-made rosé can be good in 10 years. These wines, you know, they kind of have a ticking clock the minute you release them, and people want them to be very, very fresh. But if they're well-made, they can last for years.
Oh yeah. I think you could hold on to a Tavel for 10, 15 years.
Oh, absolutely.
Easily.
And some of these Sangiovese, you could do the same. Now, there have been vintages we had that didn't hold them, so I think I figured out why. But
I think this one will.
oh yeah,
Fruit.
this will definitely.
You have an herbal quality to this one, but it's,
Yeah,
controlled by the
there's definitely
strawberries and citrus flavors.
a freshness to it that if you insist on calling herbal, I'll accept.
Okay. He's endorsing my herbal note. Just beautiful wines, reasonably priced. I think both of them are very. I mean, if you buy a Côte d'Aron Blanc, some of them could be $50.
Oh yeah.
Some of the big boys, especially from Chateauneuf-du-Pape.
Yeah, the Chateauneuf-du-Pape Blanc. My French winemaker friends admire the white more than the red from Chateauneuf-du-Pape.
I like those.
Chateauneuf-du-Pape is an export wine in their opinion, but the Blanc is something they keep their own hands on.
Yeah. Okay, so now talk about this new label design. That
Yeah, we're talking about value-oriented wines, and we make an inexpensive red called Rob's Red Blend. And this year we've adjusted the label a little bit. I guess I have to show you last year's label.
Yeah, so
which
this
is
So
here.
they didn't have this is, what is this, a gargoyle?
It's a Griffin,
Griffin. Ah,
as am I.
okay. So a Griffin.
It could be thought of as a gargoyle or
Yeah.
a dragon,
Yes.
but it's a Griffin.
A Griffin.
And we just changed it up a little bit on the label, mostly for fun. And this blend is dominated by Cabernet, Merlot, and Syrah in various proportions that my marketing and wholesale people urged me to keep off the label, so we don't. The danger there being is that people will mourn the fact that they can't get last year's blend when this year's blend is out.
Oh, I see.
But
So it's non-vintage.
Well, no, it's vintage.
Okay.
But it's
What did they tell you to leave off the label? I missed that.
the specific varietal combination.
Oh, really?
But it's Cabernet, Merlot, and Syrah. And perhaps, quite honestly, if we have a little leftover Petit Verdot or something, it's going to end up in here too.
Gotcha.
But those wines together can make just, I think, a marvelous, tasty.
Well, it's interesting. I did a little survey on my YouTube channel, and most consumers do want to know what's on there. Maybe not the percentages, but
Perhaps so. You know, the data I've read would say just the opposite. So we all believe
Well,
the polls we want to believe.
I'm a small slice of everything, so.
But we have that information available for you. And, it's somewhere on the web in our notes,
Gotcha.
so we're not hiding from it. We just don't.
Boy, this has a really kind of a very jammy nose.
It has I think it has a little herb in a positive sense, something like thyme or marjoram, or I'm not not a good enough hand with herbs to tell you exactly
Well, I'm
which.
okay with that description.
But it's no good. I'm delighted. but what it isn't is pyrazine. It's not bell pepper.
No, not at all.
But it's fresh. It's youthful. It's you know,
It's like a currant and blackberry jam sort of thing.
Wines like rosé and this blend, you know, people can say they're not very serious. We're deadly serious about it. It's serious as a heart attack to us, but they're very easy wines to enjoy and wrap yourself around without having to make excuses.
I'm kind of weird, but the phrase I like the least when a sales rep comes to me and say, "This is a fun wine," I'm thinking to myself, well, how is this wine fun? I mean, you can't play with it. You know, you can't throw a ball to it. You can't. I mean, I don't know. My sense of fun is that it's not a serious wine, and I think almost all winemakers, aside from mass producers, are serious about their wines.
Oh, absolutely. You know,
Yeah.
we stress over all kinds of, you know, minutiae. Some of our blends, literally, we taste upwards of 50 times blind with minor adjustments, you know,
Wow.
a little more of this, a little less of that, till we finally arrive at something that all of us, and by all of us, I mean myself, my daughter Megan, and our associate winemaker,
Yeah.
Nikki, who's been with us for 20 years. And
Mhm.
we sit down and taste these wines, and our cellar master has just completed an educational program at Yakima Valley College, so he's starting to join us in the tasting. So
Blending is really, I've noticed that blending is really the art side of it.
absolutely, and you know, we sometimes, you know, we taste other people's wines. Sometimes we're very excited about it. Sometimes we wonder if they taste it.
We won't name names.
Absolutely not.
So this is, again, very good acidity, good food wine, but very delicious at the same time.
Yeah, it's you know, it's not a wine with huge depth, but it's fresh, it's cleansing. It is a great food wine. This would be magnificent with a hamburger or a pizza.
Barbecue chicken.
Yeah, or there are a lot of things. That
Oh, yeah.
you know, up to and including filet mignon.
And again, only, you know, under $14, a solid red blend. You get that Syrah kind of comes right out of the backside. Yeah.
And then the Syrah gives it a little more softness and depth on
And
the palate.
length on the palate,
and
yeah.
length on the palate, absolutely.
Well, that is awesome. So I think, I'm relatively sure that most people from Washington State can identify with Barnard Griffin. I mean, your label's been around a long time. You changed from the tulip label when? I can't remember. It's
Oh gosh, that's been 8 or 9 years ago.
8 or 9 years ago. So I
Seems
used to have
like it.
tulips all over the label. Very very easy to identify
Right
on the
there.
shelf.
I don't know if that's
you
on
have
the
it?
screen or not. But,
Oh yeah, up on the top there. I don't know. Anyway, he went with that label for a long time.
yeah, and you know, we loved that label when we first came out with it in 1983. It was kind of avant-garde. There was an element of abstraction to it. But over time, that kind of representational floral thing became, in people's minds, more of a grocery store thing. So
That's true.
we kind of had to keep with the times, and more to the point, we need to reinvent ourselves every so
Sure.
often. I'll tell the story. What really made me realize we had to change the label is my daughter Megan. She was in college at the time, and she came through with one of her friends who came by, and they gave it to her, and you know, I came upon him, and she introduced me to the guy, and he was very complimentary. He said, "Oh, I know this label. It's my grandmother's favorite wine." And that was like hitting me over the head with a hammer. You know, yes, God bless your grandmother, but we need to get through to you. So a change has to happen every
Yeah.
so often.
I think it's a great change. I think
Yeah.
the labels are really good, nice and stately, but you know, not too
Yeah, we're
snobby by any
we're
stretch.
not trying to be, you know, we're not trying to put more foil on than anyone else, and
Sure.
so forth.
Well, I appreciate it, Rob, you taking the time out. I mean, I know we're right.
Well, yeah.
Fruit's coming in right now. Rob's very tired.
What Stan might not have told you is he drove all the way over here. So thank you, Stan.
Yeah,
for,
but we're kind of hanging out, enjoying ourselves. So
Well, good.
we're not
good.
crushing grapes and watching fruit come in, and driving to vineyards. And you said you put about 200 miles in today? Yesterday.
And the day before. No,
Checking vineyards and all that. So it's a big job.
today we received lots and lots of fruit, so I was here at the winery most of the day today.
Cool. Thanks, Rob, for taking
Well, great. Thank
time out.
you. Real pleasure.
You guys keep watching, and I'll keep helping you spend your wine dollars wisely. There we go.
Great.